Chris, why you come in laughing? What's up, y'all? Okay, hold on. Let me put this up here. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. Welcome to all my kings and queens. Hold on. Let me see. My man Kevin is in here. There you go. My boy Kevin. So Toby, my guy, and Rec, peace. There he is. Kevin, what's up, man?
What's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well. That's an excellent backdrop you have. You're killing me.
I'm working on. Hey, check this out. I knew you was gonna show up with your Detroit hat game on, so I had to wear mine. But hey, check mine out on the side though. I gotta get you
the merch. Okay, you got the merch popping.
I gotta get you one of these, man, with the NAMI logo on it.
Okay, yeah, man. Yeah. They talking in the comments about my Tony Montana chair.
I see that.
Kevin, please don't get jealous, man.
I'm gonna ask my wife if I can have one.
So what's up, man? How you feeling, my good brother?
I'm good, man. I'm really excited to be here with you and kicking this thing off tonight. So I'm excited about it. How about you?
I'm doing well, man. A lot of people don't know that mental health and mental health awareness is actually, it's a passion of mine. And it's largely due to my journey, which I'm gonna get into throughout this hour that we're kicking it. But you've helped me a lot too. Just my conversations, my deep conversations that I've had with you. So I want to thank you too, as well. So I think you should maybe you could give everybody a little background about yourself, and then after you're finished, I'll just go in with my testimony, because that's what I like to do. I like to give testimony.
Exactly, and I'll do a little bit of mine, but I want this to be about you. So, okay. I came to mental health advocacy, 2011. So I've been doing this for about 9 years, and I got involved because my oldest son Dominique was diagnosed bipolar schizophrenic when he was 23. I'm sorry, he was 20 years old back in 2007, and then unfortunately, what we learned really quickly is we were really ignorant to mental illness, what diagnosis meant, what resources were available, what does recovery really mean, what kind of life he was going to have ahead of him, because it was pretty serious mental illness. I mean, bipolar schizophrenia is pretty serious. And unfortunately, on June 27th of 2010, we lost him to suicide.
Oh.
So trying to find help and understanding for myself, my wife actually introduced me to NAMI because I was really struggling with, the grief of losing him. And it was one of those, maybe you can help yourself by helping others. So I joined NAMI as a volunteer, which NAMI is like 98% a volunteer organization. Never with the idea that it was going to lead me to becoming the state executive director for Michigan and basically a new career for me. And so I've been executive director for 6 years. I love what I do. I love working with people like you, because most people who are advocates in this space, we're all passionate, man. We all have a story. We all have lived experience. And this is not a job. This is not something we do on the side. This is something we love. And so having somebody like you with your celebrity and your story to tell and your willingness to share that, man, that's huge. And I respect what you're doing. And I'm so grateful for what you're doing. We're really, really excited to welcome you into this space as an advocate. So I'm gonna pass it to you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Great man. Now, before I go, what does NAMI stand for? It's an acronym. It stands for what?
It is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. We have over 650 affiliates across the country, and all we focus on is helping people who are affected by mental illness, not just people who've been diagnosed, but their family members, caregivers, people who are experiencing suicidal ideation or substance use or anything that touches your mental health. We are involved in trying to make your life better.
Okay. All right. So with me, most of the people who follow me know that I decided to get sober 8 years ago. 8 years ago, about 8 years ago, I had like I call it a spiritual awakening. Like I woke up one day with just this overwhelming feeling. I can't even remember what city I was in. I think I was in New York maybe. And I just woke up one day, man, and I just decided that I was done with just all of the bad decisions associated with just drinking every single day. I mean, I had got to the point where every single thing that I was doing in life was just like alcohol was a part of it. I'm talking about, Kev, everything.
I got you.
Like I couldn't do an interview. I couldn't barely talk on the phone. I get on the phone with my wife, you know, if the call is going in a certain direction, you know what I mean? Just to kind of get through it, because, you know, it was so many, it was a coping mechanism for so many things. So I started to notice that I was just making all of my bad decisions that I was making was just, all of them were rooted to alcohol in some sort of way. Mm-hmm. And I started getting to the age where doing all of these things under the public microscope, in the public eye, like doing all of these things. And then you got kids that are growing up as well. My son was in middle school. You know, like I had like this thing on media takeout where I got caught with these girls. You know what I'm saying? Like my wife's mom's, her side of the family seeing stuff. You know, my mom is seeing stuff. All of the women that are in my life that I hold dear to my heart, you know, they're looking at me like, man, you know what I mean? And these are women who sort of look up to me, you know what I mean, in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? So they were looking at me, and it just started to feel crazy. So I called my mom and dad, I called my wife, I called my good friend Marshall, because he's like the only person that I knew who was in sobriety as an artist who I could talk to. So I called him and I spoke to him, and he said some things to me that resonate with me to this day. He said, Royce, listen, he said, what you telling me right now is the realest thing you've ever said to me. He said, you're strong today. He said, you're strong today. He said, what you don't realize is the strength that it takes to admit that you're powerless over this is everything. You know, because most of us would kind of like process it as some sort of a weakness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was like, but it's not. He was like, this is strength. And I was like, wow, that's a different perspective. That's a different way to look at it. So I went into it feeling a lot better, and that helped me to kind of stick to it as well. So when I started to go through the process of just being sober, I started out just drying out. You know what I mean? And then I started to see a therapist. My man Pete, who I still speak to this day, he's the one who gives me all of my chips, all of my important chips everywhere. I keep them right here on my computer, all my chips.
Yep.
He gives me all of those, right? So I started speaking to him, and he's a white guy. He's a white guy from the UK, and he's a former addict. Well, he's an addict himself, and we just related to each other in a lot of ways. So, and for me to be able to like just get everything out, and I remember the first time I seen him, we sitting there talking, and he just asking me general questions. I'm just like talking, and then one thing leads to another, and I'm in tears. Like, Kev, you've been knowing me for a minute, but bro, I never cry. I never cry. I don't cry at funerals. Tears is not really my thing. So it was like the emotion just came jumping out uncontrollably. And it came jumping out in a way that was more of a relief than anything. I started just feeling the burden on my shoulders, just, you know what I mean, just getting lighter and lighter. So I started to realize through conversation with him that I was carrying around a lot, you know, like, and me and it's a lot of this shit, man, is linked to the relationship that I have with my dad. You know what I mean? Like, me and my dad are super tight. That's my man. He's a great man. Great man. You know, and he old school with it. He's old school with it. You know, he ruled the house with an iron thumb. And everything was about discipline, and everything was full contact, and everything was, you know, bop, watch your mouth. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's that guy. So I think a lot of things that I seen growing up and a lot of things that he went through with my mom, I just think a lot of those things affected me more than I knew. So what I did was I got to a point in life as a child where I didn't deal with much emotion, you know, because I want to say I didn't get taught how to communicate in that way, you know, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it does.
Like I didn't learn how to talk my way to a solution. And I developed into the kind of a thinker that wasn't much of a solutionary thinker. So what I would do was I would do a lot of talking about the problem if it was ever a situation, and then I would suppress feelings. That was the main thing. Every single feeling, man, I just suppress it. I just take it and put it somewhere, so I don't have to think about it. And that became my easiest way to deal with things, man, because it was just like, what else am I gonna do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I normalized a whole lot of behavior, and I didn't process any of these things as any sort of trauma. Traumatic experiences were just not. I didn't identify with these as traumatic experiences. You know, something really, really traumatic would happen at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and then the next morning at lunch, you know, we all sitting around eating Frosted Flakes like nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and then also my relationship with my brother, my big brother. You know, like me and my big brother were really tight until I want to say until I got into the record business.
Yeah.
You know, like our relationship started to change, but he got in some trouble sort of early in life over me.
Okay.
I got into a situation, we were playing basketball. I got into a situation at the basketball court, and I got into it with a guy who was older than me and who was bigger than me. And I got into a fight with the guy, and then my brother, I'm gonna say, for lack of a better term, he overreacted.
Okay.
He overreacted and he cut the guy.
Okay.
He ran to the car and got a knife and came back and cut the guy. And for some reason, man, I always kind of like correlate that kind of behavior to how overprotective that he was over me and my siblings based off of his relationship with my dad.
Yeah.
You know, like my dad was like the big bad wolf. So his thing was, I'm gonna always protect my brothers, always protect my brothers. So I even got a skit on one of my albums. I hate to throw a shameless plug in there, but I even got a skit on one of my albums called Protecting Ryan, where I kind of detail what happens. So long story short, he cut the guy, really, really went into a really emotional, unnecessary rage. And he cut the guy, and that was his first. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because that was his first time getting in trouble, where he had to actually go do time. And since that time, he's never been able to really bounce back. You know what I mean? Like he's never been able to. Since then, it's been in and out of prison, and it affected his mind frame.
Yeah.
You know, like the way that he thinks. I just feel like that. So I feel like once I got into the music business, me and him started going through a lot of things where I was just kind of like wondering, like, where is this coming from? Yeah. You know, like, are you angry with me about something? You know, like, and whenever I talk to him, I'd be like, what's the problem? And he'd be like, what's your problem? You know what I mean? Yeah. What's your problem? I don't got the problem. You got the problem. You know what I mean? So our relationship has kind of been like that. And then we're both heavy drinkers. You know, there's been tons of situations where we've been together drinking, and it just got bad. You know, like me and him just arguing with each other, wrestling around on the ground with each other. You know, just being drunks. Yep. You know, and not really knowing where the rage is coming from. So once I started to talk to somebody, and I started being able to put all of these things in perspective, at least some sort of way that I could see it in my mind where I can make some sense of it. It really helped me a lot to be able to push past certain things and make it okay for me to deal with certain things.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You know, so when I think about that, I think about everything that's going on in the world. I think about all the things that Black people are going through, all the positions that we're forced into.
Yep.
All of the areas that, all of the marginalized areas that, you know, the subjugated areas that we're marginalized to, all of the ways in which we're behind the 8 ball, you know, redlining, all of these things.
Yep.
You know, like we're born into these situations and we don't even realize it. You know, like
Yep.
we view success as like this thing that we see on the other end of our TVs. And it seems like such a far away place, you know, and what happens is, you know, we start to idolize these people who we see make it to the TV. And we think that, you know, the dollar that Jay-Z has in his pocket is more valuable than the dollar that you know, we have in our pocket.
Yep.
You know, and then we start to kind of like blame ourselves for things. Like all through school, I always just felt like, damn, maybe I'm not an academic, because I would go to school, and don't get me wrong, I was just like any other kid. I would go to school and I would fuck up, you know what I'm saying? But sometimes I wanted to do good. I swear, I promise. Like sometimes I wanted to do good, and then I would go, and then next thing you know, I'm daydreaming, and then bam, the bell ringing. Whole hour worth of class gone. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So, and I look at people who really excel. Like my wife she's academic. You know, school was nothing to her. Boom, 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 no problem. You know, so it wasn't until I met Michelle Lino, Kevin. It wasn't until I met Michelle Lino. We were doing a thing with Brother Moosh. Brother Moosh, it was it was one of those programs that we were doing at one of the schools. Ceasefire.
Yep, Ceasefire.
Yep. Brother Trick, Brother Moosh, Reggie Reg, Michelle Lino. And I spoke to Michelle Lino, and she's a psychologist. So I spoke to her, and she told me, she said, a lot of artists and producers, I find that the similarities with you guys is you do a lot of daydreaming in class. You do a lot of doodling. Like she just ran down everything that is me. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow. I was like, yeah. So she was like, see, what was supposed to happen was somebody was supposed to notice that, and somebody was supposed to know that you had a natural inclination to just be creative.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And put you in some sort of performing arts school or some sort of situation where maybe you got smaller classes to where you could get the one-on-one attention.
Yeah.
In order to be able to thrive. So she was like, so sometimes it's not that you failed the institution. A lot of times it's the institution failed you.
Yep.
So then when you start to think about the funding that goes into, you know, some of the schools, or the funding that's left over that's used for a lot of these schools, and then, you know, like just what they have to be able to pay these teachers, and a lot of the teachers not being certified, and just where you fall on a socioeconomic scale, it becomes really telling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as soon as I introduced the possibility of the institution failing me into my mind, it made me look at the way that I parent my kids a little bit differently.
Yeah.
You know, like I wasn't so willing to just take whatever it is that the teacher had to say at parent-teacher conference.
Yep.
You know, because when we would go to parent-teacher conference with my dad, they would tell him the same thing. He's a bright kid. We love him. He's charming as all hell. You know what I mean? But he's not applying himself. He needs to apply himself more. So that became the caveat. It was always, boy, you need to apply yourself. You know what I mean? And I'm like, damn, I'm trying. And I just started to think, you know, maybe school wasn't for me like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I even developed the admiration for those who, you know, were academics, who can actually, you know, sit through whole lectures, and people who can retain information, studying and all of that shit. And then I ended up becoming a rapper, and I got more words retained in my brain than any academic you can think of. You know what I mean? So that debunks that. You know what I mean? So I just once I got to the point where I started feeling like, man, maybe the system can be challenged. Maybe the teachers can be challenged. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe there's other things. Maybe there's other ways you know, to just become better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, you hit on a lot of really good stuff, and I wish we could have Dr. Lino, appear on screen with us. So I know she's listening in, and she and I have had these conversations before. So first of all, I want to let your audience know I am not a doctor, psychiatrist, psychologist. I'm an advocate. Mm-hmm. But, I've spent a lot of time with this, and I spend a lot of time with doctors, and I pick up stuff. So I'm not diagnosing anybody. Don't try to take this home and say, Kevin Fisher from NAMI, diagnose me. Now, having said that, a couple of the things you hit on, first of all, the trauma that you experienced growing up, whether it was your relationship with your dad, your brother, things that went on in school. You and Michelle probably talked about something called ACEs, which is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And what ACEs does, it's a study. It's a 10-question quiz that you take, and it talks to you about trauma in your home. Was there physical, sexual abuse? Were you ever worried about being homeless? Were you ever worried about being hungry? Did you witness violence? Those kinds of things. All of those things, they take this information in and you score. And what's really interesting about ACEs, and it's really accurate, is that it kind of tells you how unresolved trauma can affect the rest of your life. And it could be with mental health conditions, it could be with heart conditions, it could be cancer, because one of the things you hit on as well is you talked about how you compartmentalize things. You said, I didn't problem solve, I just pushed stuff off to the side. Mm-hmm. Hey man, what we don't understand as an entire society, and especially in the Black community, is that stuff, those experiences, that trauma, that anger, that stuff builds up inside of us, and it's got to come out some way. Mm-hmm. And the way it comes out sometimes is a mental health crisis, but a lot of times it shows up as hypertension, it shows up as a stroke, it shows up as cancer, it shows up as heart failure. And for us men in particular, you talked about your dad, and I grew up, I'm a little older than you, you can tell by the gray, but my dad was a World War II vet. And my dad ran the house very much like yours. It was do what I say because I said so. If you don't, I got these belts strategically placed around the house. It was that kind of thing. We're taught as men to be protectors and providers and not to talk about our feelings. We don't say, honey, I'm depressed. Honey, I'm feeling anxiety because I got all this pressure on me, whether it's at work, school, anxiety from racism. We internalize all of that stuff. That is in large part why men's life expectancy is shorter than women. Women get it out. Women gonna talk. Men, we've been taught to keep it in, and it's literally killing us. And we don't understand that. There's so much to it. You talked about your counselor and the fact that he's white. And that's a great point I want to hit on, because you and I talked about this last week. I listened to an interview with Snoop on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne a couple weekends ago.
I've seen that,
and he talked about the same thing. And there's this thing called cultural competency. A lot of people want to be treated or seen by people who look like them. And so a lot of requests I get is people will say, Kevin, can you connect me with an African-American female psychologist? And of course, the first one that comes to my mind is Michelle Lino. Well, Michelle Lino can't, take care of everybody I know. Right. And so what Snoop said, and what I want us as a people to understand, is cultural competence is really important, but don't let that exclude you from getting the help that you need, because there's a huge shortage of behavioral health professionals, period, certainly among African Americans. And just like your experience with your counselor, and I had a counselor years ago, I had an older white guy who was my counselor. We got along great. Race never played into it. It's about making that connection. And Snoop said on his interview, he said, I went to counsel. He said he had several Black counselors, and I don't know if they were psychologists, psychiatrists, but he said he had several Black counselors. And he said the problem he ran into was they were telling him what he wanted to hear. So he actually told his support staff, management, whoever, he said, go find me a white one. And he said it was actually the white one that made the difference in his life, because he said, I wanted somebody who would tell me that I'm screwed up.
Right.
He said, I don't want a yes man. So we have to factor all of that information in. And the last thing I'm going to hit on that you said, I mean, you said a lot of good stuff, but the last thing I'm going to hit on, you talked about crying with your counselor. We men, again, is this thing we call toxic masculinity. We men are taught we're not supposed to cry. We know, you know, crying is weak. Saying I'm depressed is weak. It's not. Crying, after losing my son, I learned this. And I cry a lot. I lost my son 10 years ago, man, and I cried about it yesterday. Crying is cleansing for me. And I think most men will find that. Crying is a vehicle to get that stress, that pressure, all of that out of you. Just like you said, after you had a good cry with your counselor, you said you felt lighter when you walked out. I do the same thing. People feel for me because they say, you know, you relive this trauma of losing your son all the time. And part of my job, I do a lot of presentations and I have to talk about it all the time. And people see that weight. The part that they don't see that I never take for granted is, yeah, sometimes I go out to my car and have a good cry. But when I do that, I feel a sense of relief. And so we men have to learn to take care of ourselves. And I don't care if you're white, black, Hispanic, we all deal with this toxic masculinity. But we men need to understand that it ain't weak to cry. It's not weak to go and say, you know what, I got the weight of the world on my shoulders. And seeing a counselor is not weakness. It's actually strength. What M told you was absolutely right. That's strength. That's real strength.
What do you think it is in our community? Why do you think the stigma related to mental health in our community is what it is? Like, just like, let's say, for example, I would bring up the possibility of my big brother seeing somebody. Like, yep. Are you out of your mind? I don't need to talk to anybody. Like, ain't nothing wrong with me. Nobody can fix me. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah. Where do you think that stigma comes from?
Well, it comes from, I almost want to say, our heritage. Like you said, your father was strong, ran the house with an iron fist. My dad was a World War II vet, same thing. Didn't talk about his feelings. You know, my dad was my man too. Matter of fact, still is. I lost my dad when I was 15. That was 40 years ago. And he's still the best man I ever knew. My dad, I never remember, and I can't say he didn't, but I never remember my dad once saying, I love you. Mm-hmm. Because that wasn't their way in that era. But here's the other side. And people hear that and they say, well, that's so sad. No, because the other side of the coin is I always knew and I never questioned my father's love for me. It was the way he looked at me. It was the way he shook my hand before I went to bed at night. I never doubted my old man loved me, ever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But to that point, we've not learned how to get that out because historically, culturally, and stigma affects everybody. But specific to the Black community, we see it as a sign of weakness to raise your hand and say, I'm stressed. I feel anxiety. I'm depressed. I'm angry. I need to get this out in a productive way so I don't hurt myself, my family, my relationship. You mentioned, you know, and I remember I read your bio and you talked about when you started your sobriety. I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I think your son said you were his superhero or something to that effect. That changes the world, man. You know, and it's powerful enough to change us. And we have to be willing to do that. But we have to not drink the Kool-Aid, and we have to change it and say, you know what? I'm not going to let somebody else dictate to me that I'm weak if I say I need help, because getting help saves your family, saves your relationship with your kids, literally can save your life. And so that's just the way it is in our culture. And real quick on the stigma thing, you know, as it relates to mental health, in the Black community, we don't like to admit that a person needs mental health care. You know, we'll say, well, Ricky or Ray, he was always a little different. I always like to use the analogy from the movie Soul Food. And if people remember the movie Soul Food, there was a character, Uncle Pete, who they kept in the back room at Big Mama's house. Yeah. And they did, in their minds, they were doing right by Uncle Pete. He was at Big Mama's house. He was safe. He had a roof over his head. He got fed 3 squares of meat a day. He was good, cool. At the end of the movie, and you remember during the movie, everybody scared Uncle Pete. At the end of the movie, when he came out the back room when the family was falling apart, 2 things came out. 1, Uncle Pete really did have that TV stuff with money. And 2, Uncle Pete had some sense. And that's the thing, that's part of the stigma of living with mental illness. A lot of people think because you live with a mental illness, you're less intelligent. And I learned this from my son, because my son was an aspiring rapper too. He was a very good academic student. But when he was going through a really tough time with his treatment and stuff, we were sitting in the car one day and he said, "Dad, you know, I don't like it when people talk about me like I'm not in the room." Because me and the doctors had been talking about him. And he said, "I'm not stupid. Just because they say I have this disease does not mean I'm stupid." And it was a punch in the gut for me, because I realized that I was treating him like he was less intelligent. And so that changed for me that day. And he and I had an agreement. I said, "You know what? I won't disrespect you like that anymore. I'll talk to you like a man. I'll expect you to participate in your treatment plan like a man. And when you get off course, I'm going to say something to you like a man." And that period of his time, he started doing better. So we just got to push the old stigma, old stuff away. And as men, own it and say, "You know what? I'm going to raise my hand and say, you know what? My substance use, whether it's drinking, drugs, whatever, it's a problem. And like you, I want a better life. I want to have a better family life. I'm going to move on. If I'm feeling some kind of way, as we say it, with depression or anxiety, I'm not weak if I go get a counselor. And if you don't want nobody to know, guess what? Ain't nobody going to know. That's your business."
I think everybody should seek treatment.
Yep.
Whether they feel like they need to or not. Because, I mean, when I started talking to Pete, in my mind, I was going to him to speak to him specifically about alcohol abuse. And that turned into...
Well, because you got into why you were drinking. And most people, and forgive me for cutting you off, but most people, 50% of the people who have serious substance use problems have underlying mental health issues, whether it's trauma, depression, whatever it may be. And so they end up doing what we call self-medicating. And we self-medicate with alcohol, drugs, those kinds of things, because we're trying to push the problem away. But what we really need to do is have a Pete in our life who we can go to and get to the root of the problem and say, like you said, why am I drinking? Why is alcohol such a big part of my life? Because then once you learn to deal with that, you didn't need to drink anymore.
Right. Exactly. Because I was just like, I didn't know I was self-medicating. I took listen, man, going up to that park and playing basketball all the time is where I got most of my trouble as a kid. And I distinctly remember a whole lot of my friends, because it was a bunch of us. I could easily get on the phone and get 30, 40 people together with no problem. You know what I mean? So it was like a bunch of us. And then I remember when they first started drinking beers, they first started drinking like 40s and malt liquor and all of that. You know what I mean? Then and it was always, to me, it was like, man, y'all drinking? Oh man, I ain't drinking, man. I'm a hooper. I'm an athlete. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And then also, my big brother used to come in because he started drinking early. He got right to it. So he was hanging out. I'll never forget. It was this guy across the street named Sean, who was an excellent college student. He went to Michigan State, and he used to get like 3.7 GPAs, and we just looked at him like a academic superhero. You know, like my dad, Sean. He's always getting good grades. Sean. You know what I mean? So Greg used to hang out with Sean, but unbeknownst to my dad, Greg used to hang out with Sean and get up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, so he would come in from wherever they hanging out at and be just belligerent, falling out drunk. And I remember me and my younger brother just used to look at him and be like, man, you know, like, I don't want that. I don't want that because it's causing too many problems in the house. Him and my dad constantly arguing, because my dad, he wasn't letting nothing go.
Yeah.
Like, if you come in drunk from anywhere, he'll know you too drunk to really hold a real conversation, but he'll keep you there. all night, you know, and just grill you and just make as much noise as possible. And, you know, like just totally disrupt whatever harmonious energy is in the air at the time, you know what I'm saying, in the house. So I used to be like, man, I don't want that. So I'm never going to do that. You know, and that's kind of like one of the things that I stuck by. And then getting into the music business, one of the first things that you do is you go back on the things that you stood on. You know, you draw those lines and you say, okay, I'm not going to do that. And then the first drink I took was with Dr. Dre. And it wasn't because he was pressuring me. He wasn't, yo, you're not cool if you don't. He didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
All it was he was Dr. Dre. He asked me that I want to drink, and I didn't say no because I didn't want to say no because it was Dr. Dre. That's the only reason why I said yes.
Yeah.
And that's it. You know what I mean? And it's not like I don't want like the younger people watching to think that, you know, you take one drink and boom, you off to the races.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. Like alcohol is the greatest magic trick that the devil has ever conjured up. Ever. It sneaks up on you in every way you can think of. You know what I mean? Like, and it has you thinking that you're in control in every single way. Every way that you can think of. It gets rid of the right part of your inhibitions to make you feel like that everything is fine throughout the whole time. And you don't realize it until it's either a car accident, jail, or some sort of super tragic situation. You know what I'm saying? So one thing led to another. Now I'm hanging out. You know what I mean? I'm actually making relationships with people through alcohol. And the reason why I know that I have relationships with people through alcohol is because I can't even exist with those people now. Yeah. We can't have conversation. We don't have anything in common. I don't really remember them.
Yep.
They never even knew me.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it's like, that's no way to live life, man. You know what I mean? Like when you're doing that, you're basically at a standstill and life is coming at you fast. Yep. And it's impossible to be effective or successful in that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's got to a point where, you know, it would be time to leave the bar, maybe 2 in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning. And I went out of my way. I got cool with people who own bars.
Okay.
Just hang out with the bar owner. You know what I mean? So we just hang out with the bar owner and just sit there all night, even after the time where it's closed, and we just drink and we just drink and drink and drink. And to me, that was the life. And I always used to wonder when everybody was ready to go home, why did I still want to drink? I thought I was just some sort of extremist. I never was thinking to myself that I'm escaping something, you know? Yeah. And then talking to somebody, that's when you realize it. Yeah. After you did all that fucking up. You know what I'm saying? Like after, you know, like after your mistakes have touched so many different people's lives and, you know, like so many things have happened, so many messed up situations where people got hurt, so much unnecessary violence, things happening to me doing things to other people, being responsible for things that happen to other people that I look back in retrospect. And I just feel like it was unnecessary because I feel like if I could have just been sober, I could have said the right things or talked to the right people and just made things be at bay and made things just be cool. Yeah. So nothing had to happen. I feel like that's what I owe the universe. If I have that ability to be able to speak to somebody in a way that can calm things down and keep things going. And that's why a lot of times now people wonder why I'm so adamant about unity in Detroit, because I seen the result of the absolute opposite. Like I played my part in Detroit being all scattered out and there not being enough unity because of people being at odds. And I seen where it didn't get us anywhere as a city. Yeah. I see it. It's right in front of me. You know what I mean? So that's why I despise, man, when it's issues between two of our kings from the city. Yeah. You know, especially if they're getting, you know, the notoriety that they finally deserve, or they represent a certain facet of music in Detroit, or a certain style of hip hop that wasn't, you know, previously getting the notoriety that it deserves. You know what I mean? So that's another passion of mine. But for whatever reason, man, all of this is rooted in mental health and being able to think properly. and being able to put things into perspective. And anything that people deem as success, it all starts here.
Well, I mean, you're right in so many ways, because we're talking about conflict resolution. We're talking about lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. There's so much rooted in this, and we can do better. Royce, it's not that hard. When we talk about the effects that racism has on our mental health, and we recognize now that racism is a public health crisis, but it's not just from the outside. We have a tendency as a people, and some people may not like to hear me say this. We have a tendency as a people to blame them for what they're doing to us, instead of us looking within and saying what you just said. How do we help each other? Because I'm one of those people, I lean on the serenity prayer that says, give me the sight to understand the things I can change, the wisdom to understand the things that I can't, and that kind of thing. And I'm one of those people who simply say, control what you can control. There's some things out there that I can't control that are wrong. They're dead wrong, but I can't control all of those right now. But today, I can control my relationship with you. I don't have to be jealous of your success. As you mentioned, I don't have to be jealous of your money, M's money, Jay-Z's money. I don't need to be jealous of that. I look at people like that, and I'm like, God bless you. I'm happy for you. But how do we take care of each other? How do we get past get better at conflict resolution? How do we get better at taking care of our mental health? Because all of that stuff affects our mental health too. And so there's just so much more we can do. I'm looking at the clock. I know we only got about 15 minutes. I want you to speak to what your vision is for you as a mental health advocate. What things, I know you're going to be involved with us with the NAMI Walk. That's why I got the National Day of Hope thing up behind me. For your audience, Royce has a NAMI Walks team. It's a virtual walk this year, of course, due to COVID. You can go to NAMI Walks, and we'll put this up somewhere. I'm pretty sure, matter of fact, I think you got it on your page, NAMIWalks.org/participant/Royce to 59. And you can donate $5 to his page, learn more about mental health and what you can do to take care of yourself. Those things are really important. I know you and I are going to be doing something with the High School Association of Honor Societies and Student Council. What's your vision as an advocate? How do you want to impact your audience and the public? And, how do we make that happen?
Well, with me, I found a lot of success in creating some sort of a vision, and even in the areas where I don't completely understand, or I'm not able to speak it fluently and be able to speak as intelligently as I need to about certain things. I feel like I understand that there's a void here. I understand that there's a void here, and the problem is raising the awareness. Like the countless Zoom calls that we've had. I learned about the countless just facilities around Detroit, just to even use that as an example, I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that tells me right there, there's a huge void where there's a lot of people who don't even realize that there's a stigma associated with mental health and mental health care. Yep. And I think we all sort of look at it like it's an amenity. It's an amenity, but it's not offered to us.
Yeah.
So my thing is, I want to start helping to raise awareness about it. I want to learn as I go. Yeah. I want to get to a point where I can speak about it as fluently and as eloquently as you. You know what I mean? And
I'm from Highland Park, man. Nobody's ever described me as eloquent, but go ahead.
hopefully we can get to a point where we're actually, when we dial 911, God forbid we don't have to do that much. Whenever we dial 911, we'll actually get a mental health care person. Yep. As an option, yep. as an additional option. Yep. I love for us to get to that place, but I mean that's wishful thinking. But that's kind of like my vision for it, just to raise awareness, and as we move forward, you know, as I do more things with NAMI, as I do more things with CNS, as I do more things with Dr. Michelle Lino, me and my brother Moosh, you know, hopefully other ideas will come. And then another thing that I noticed too, man, is that there is no limit, you know, like you start thinking outside the box. You know, I think like an artist, you know, I think like an artist, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
You know, rather we're building facilities with anything that we want to do. I think all things are possible, but it just requires dedication from both sides. It requires the right people speaking to the right people, like-minded people all together, thinking as a collective in solidarity and figuring out ways to just make our community better, man. You know, and I'm forever on a quest to just be better. You know, like I want to be better tomorrow than I was today, you know, in every way as a man.
Well, that's what I admire about you. And when I talk to people, you know, people ask me what it's like to talk to you, because people have this image of artists, whether you're a rapper, whatever, they have this image. And I tell people, I said, first of all, these are really intelligent people. And he is smart enough to have surrounded himself with really intelligent people. And to me, that's one of the key characteristics of a leader. You don't have to know all the facts and figures. Your passion is enough. It really is. Your passion is enough to get you started and to inspire others. And it's that passion. 9 years ago when I started this, I knew nothing about what I'm talking about now. It is an accumulation of knowledge. It's an accumulation of being smart enough to listen to other smart people. That's why I surround myself with people like Brother Mooch and Dr. Lino and Mike from CNS Healthcare and all of these other people, because those people become like consultants to me. We're friends, but I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I don't understand this. Help me understand this. There are legislators that I work. I can pick up the phone and call the Chief Justice for the state of Michigan if there's a young person who's in mental health court. And again, we can get into a lot of stuff. People don't realize all the resources that are available to them. We have mental health courts. We actually have mobile crisis centers, so units. So when you talk about picking up the phone and calling 911, or there's actually a movement for, oh God, I know it's going to go blank. There's going to be a 3-digit national helpline number like 911 for mental health, where you can get help. So your vision, we're working on that. We're going to make that a reality. So your passion and, quite frankly, your celebrity is going to help us open doors to people who need help, to legislators who need to better understand what resources we need, to providers who can better provide services in the community, to breaking down this terrible barrier that we call stigma. All of that stuff really starts with people like you, who just say, hey, this is my passion, and I think I can make a difference, and I want to help get the word out and change the way people see mental illness and the way people address it. That's enough, man. I mean, that's huge.
What about the possibility of being able to treat members of law enforcement? Like, I don't feel like that they handle the average person from law enforcement. I don't think that they handle the average citizen so well, especially people with, you know, mental illness. Like, did you see the thing where they killed the kid with autism?
Yep.
And they actually made the call, and the police, they're so hell bent on going, everybody, please, and do all the hollering and stuff like that. And, you know, we're constantly losing lives. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, last week, I was helping facilitate a training. There's a international program called Crisis Intervention Team Training. NAMI actually helped develop it back in 1989 with the University of Memphis and the Memphis Police Department, because the Memphis Police Department, very similar to the young man with autism, very similar to, and forgive me, I forget the young man's name, up in upstate New York, who was killed by police a couple of weeks ago. People call for help, and their loved ones end up getting killed. And so this crisis Memphis had a similar situation, and they came to NAMI and said, look, we recognize we got a problem and we need to learn how to better deal with people who have serious mental illnesses or in crisis. So CIT, or Crisis Intervention Team training, is all about teaching law enforcement how to recognize people who are in mental health crisis. It's 90% verbal de-escalation. You know, to your point, and most law enforcement officers hate to admit this, cops are trained. They go to academies and are trained to escalate to almost the point of violence, because we as civilians are supposed to fear the gun in the badge. And so that's why they jump out their car, freeze, put your hands up, don't move, get on the ground, and all that. That's their way of gaining control and gaining what they call safety for themselves. But what I tell cops when I'm in this training, and I mean this, they always talk about their need and right to go home safely. I have the same right. If I'm in mental health crisis or not, an arrest should not end up being a murder. Yeah. That's why we have a criminal justice system in this country that says, you arrest me, you take me to jail, you take me to trial. If I'm found guilty, you send me to jail. You don't have the right to murder me because I didn't put my hands up. And so we're training law enforcement officers not to do that. But here's the other side of that, Royce. Cops need help too. Yeah. Cops experience a lot of trauma. We talk to them about self-care, because here's what most cops don't know. First of all, cops are twice as likely to die by suicide than in the line of duty. They're going home killing themselves. The highest incidence of domestic violence in this country is in the homes of law enforcement officers. Number two is first responders, because they see all this bad stuff every day. They're trained to be aggressive, and then they go home. And I don't mean to make this sound flip, but you go home and dinner's not on the table, right? Or you want to watch the ball game and wife didn't hand you the remote fast enough, and the next thing you know, she got a black eye. Right. Because they don't know how to turn it off. But a lot of cops think, and we go through an exercise with them in this training, a lot of cops think I'm managing it. But they manage by suppression. I don't go home and tell my wife I had a terrible day. I don't go home and tell my wife I witnessed a terrible accident. They keep it all in. And just like when we started this conversation an hour ago, I said, all of that stuff you keep inside is going to come out. Yeah. It's just, how does it come out? Right. And so we try to teach them how to better take care of civilians without being violent, but also how to better take care of themselves. And where CIT has been used, and it's only been implemented in 2,700 of the more than 17,000 law enforcement departments across the country, but where it's been used, it has proven to reduce violence, officer injury, and civilian injury by over 80%. 80% people get to go home. So there's a lot out there, man. There's a lot we're working on. There's a lot you and I are going to work together. And like you said, the more you do this, you're going to become more and more educated about this, and you're going to be able to speak to this. But we need people like you, because unfortunately, the biggest problem we have with, and I'll go back to that word stigma, is we are uncomfortable talking about mental illness in this country. And the things we're uncomfortable about, the things we fear, are the things we run away from. And when over 60 million Americans are affected by mental illness every year, that's a huge number. We need to be having that conversation. So the way we normalize talking about breast cancer, back in the 70s, women didn't talk about breast cancer. It was the C word. Up until maybe 5-8 years ago, we didn't talk about LGBTQ community. They were in the closet. Right. Now, and I mean this respectfully to them, because they have pushed this conversation and said, we're going to stay in the closet no more. Now, people who don't like them are in the closet, because you will end your career, your everything, if you say something negative about the LGBT community. Right. We need to flip the script on mental health the same way. And the biggest way we can do this, and I'll say this about you and you bringing your passion to this again, is by talking about it. We don't need to spend millions of dollars on ads and all that stuff. We need to have more people like you who are willing to have conversations, so your audience, your listeners, are going home and having those conversations with their families, whether it's with their kids. And sometimes we utilize kids to educate parents, because parents, we stuck in our own ways. We're the perpetuators of this stigma. But we have programs in schools where the kids go home and educate mom and dad about mental illness and get them to open up and talk about it. That's what we need to do. To me, it's really that simple.
Okay. Hey, man, listen, it's 7:58. You said it would go like this.
Oh, yeah. I told you.
You said it would go like this. You said an hour would just go by just like that.
Yep.
Well, I love it, man. I thank you for joining me. Thank you for being there, talking to me, teaching me, educating me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story. Once again, man, you're a great man. Great man. It's an honor and a privilege to be partnered up with you in so many ways, man. Definitely, definitely.
The feeling is mutual, man. I feel the same. I have so much respect for you, your passion, what you've been through, your journey, and what you're turning this into, because you could go and just rap, but you've decided that, you know what? I'm willing to be transparent, tell my story, get out there because I can help others. And you and I have the same reasoning and rationale for why we do. We got here different ways, but it's the same thing. It boils down to passion and saying, you know what? I want to make a difference. I want to help people so they don't go through what I went through.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So,
well, everybody listening, I'm going to get back on next week. I'm going to figure out another way, maybe get somebody else on here, maybe Brother Moosh, maybe Dr. Michelle, maybe a celebrity. Who knows? But I just want to keep pushing the envelope with this. I want to keep reinforcing the importance of mental health. And once again, this is definitely a passion of mine. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, NAMI. Peace and love.
Thank you, brother. Talk to you later.
Yes, sir.